Hello! This session is going to be about teaching career development to 7th and 8th grade students. So, hello, my name is Shara Thames. I'm currently the Family Consumer Science and Career Development teacher at Decatur High School. I will be going into my 4th year teaching career development and family consumer science this fall. Today, we will identify how to start the semester off setting tones for a career development class, demonstrate how to use the frameworks and plan career development units that meet students' needs, and demonstrate how to incorporate literacy into the career development classroom. I know in my district and across the state, literacy and reading is a huge push, and so I try to incorporate that into my classroom as much as possible. So, whenever I come into my career development classroom, my students normally are asking, what are we going to learn? A lot of my students don't feel like they're ready for a career development class in the 8th grade because they are 13 and 14 years old. How in the world could we expect them to know what they are going to be at such a young age? So I tell them that this class, the main goal is for you to learn about yourself, be able to identify your strengths and your weaknesses at this moment, and use what you learn to help identify what you might want to do as a career when you grow up. You will learn what you need to do to graduate high school and what options you have after completing high school. You will also prepare yourself to enter into the workforce. So I tell them that this is not necessarily them learning exactly what they want to do when they grow up, but it's giving them the tools in their toolbox to help them be successful when they enter into high school and as they're leaving high school. So I obviously want to set up my classroom for success at the beginning of each semester. So during the first week of the semester, I take time to get to know my students a little bit better, getting to build those good relationships. I use a Google form. That's a student survey, but I also take this one step further and I do one on one interviews with my students. So, this sets the tone for success by giving them good interview practice right off the bat and just setting that tone within my classroom. But also, I do work in a Title I school, and so giving students the opportunity to talk to me one on one really helps with that building relationships piece because a lot of times the students in my classroom don't get to talk to an adult one on one. So that's a really cool part of this experience for them. So this is what I asked them. I just print these off and cut them into half sheets, and then I write a few notes as they go through their answers. I ask them what their full name is, what's your favorite memory, what's something you enjoyed this summer, what's something you're looking forward to this school year, what is something you enjoy doing outside of school, and what is something I should know about you to help our school year go more smoothly. What would you consider a personal strength, and what would you consider a personal weakness? I will say students have a little bit of a hard time with questions 7 and 8 about strengths and weaknesses, but as we get into unit 1, they really start uncovering that information and they kind of have that aha moment, which is really cool to see it kind of come full circle. What is your favorite letter of the alphabet? Which is just kind of a fun question, and it's really cool to see students' personalities. And then, if you were given $100, what would you spend it on? Which sometimes they get some really heartbreaking answers for that one, but it's a really good way to get to see really where your students' thoughts are. Aside from setting my classroom up for success, what else I do for me as a teacher is I set up my curriculum map. So, this is my curriculum map, and I have every standard for career development listed. So, you can see I have the major like heading here, which is Unit 1 or Standard 1, and it's develop self evaluation. Now, something else I do besides just listing out all the frameworks and like making a list of what I might want to do in that unit, I actually put links within my curriculum map. That way, when it's time for me to start teaching unit 1, I just click on this and then I have the links and everything right there. I'm not having to dig into my drive. I'm trying to work smarter, not harder. I do make a digital interactive notebook for each of my units, which you will learn about more here in just a second. But this is where I put all of that information. I'm a big fan of Google and putting the links directly within my docs. If your school uses Google, I 10 out of 10 recommend that you do that. It helps you just find stuff so much easier. And I think if you use Microsoft, you can do that as well. So I would really, if you don't do that already, you should. Now, for each unit, I also have how many weeks or what weeks I plan on teaching that unit. So you can see standard 1, I have weeks 2 and 3. Standard 2, I have weeks 4, 5, and 6. So on and so forth. I do leave 2 weeks extra within my curriculum map, and most of the time I do end up using those weeks just kind of out of flow over weeks, because that gives us about 10 days. So if we go a day longer on assignment, we're okay. So I have some room to wiggle. If not, then we do some fun team building exercises because it's the end of the semester. Although I will say, I think I've normally only had like maybe 1 or 2 extra days in there. So it's been really beneficial to set it up that way. Now, as I stated when I was talking about my curriculum map, I do make a DIMB, or a digital interactive notebook, for each one of my units. If you don't know what a digital interactive notebook is, that's okay. I have learned everything about digital interactive notebooks within the last year from this Facebook page. I know y'all are probably a part of the Facts Teachers Facebook page and the Arkansas Facts Teachers Facebook page. If you are not a part of the digital interactive notebooks page, I really, really recommend that you do it. It is a great tool. If you go to announcements, there is a ton of digital interactive notebooks already made for you. There is some excellent content on here. Lindsay Harlan has made videos on how she figured out how to do things, and those with what I've used in my toolbox to help me make these. So everything that I know how to do is all from this page. So if you're not a part of this, I really think you should be. It's really cool. So now I'm going to talk about what I do within each unit. You're going to actually get to see in my digital interactive notebooks. I use the same setup for my digital interactive notebooks for each one of my units and my portfolio project. The only unit that I don't is unit 4. And when we get to unit 4, I'll kind of explain what I do and why I do it the way that I do. So within unit 1, Unit 1 is our unit that is developing self-awareness evaluation. So I start every DIMB that I have off this way. They have a cover. And I have students create their cover. And for this unit, I want them to copy and paste photos, clip arts, etc. to personalize their notebook. So this is another way that I'm getting to know my students better, is by looking at their notebook and seeing what they're interested in. My next slides are my word wall. So my word wall, I have the word here, and then I make them type a definition and a sentence for each one of their words. I do give them a link to a Quizlet, and I will say I am not the owner of the majority of these Quizlets, because I do try not to reinvent the wheel as much as possible. We're working smarter, not harder. So I do advise my students to use their own words in their definition. However, I work with students that do not have, are not on high reading levels, or they're English language learners. So some of my students, asking them to create their own definition of a word in their own words, they're not there yet. And so I provided them the Quizlet so that they have a tool in their toolbox to help them write this definition. Now, why have students do a word wall? Like I've said, we're all literacy teachers. We're all trying to incorporate literacy within our classrooms. And so I feel like using vocabulary to do that, and not just having them, spit out a definition, but use the word in a sentence, is providing that opportunity to incorporate some literacy within the career development class. I also teach English language learners, several English language learners, like I said, and using word walls with English language learners is a really beneficial tool. I teach 7 different preps, so it would be very hard for me to have wall space for me to have 7 different word walls up for each one of my classes with essential vocab for each unit. So this provides them that word wall tool on their own devices. Now, I will say this. I do not take time out of my class to work on word wall or to work on notebook covers. So, how do students get this done? I have students complete their daily assignment first, and then I'm finished. Now what? Okay, well, now what? You can work on decorating your notebook cover or completing your word wall. So, this is what provides them an activity to do on their own Once they're finished with the day's work, that keeps them from having idle hands and doing things that they shouldn't be doing. So that's a great classroom management piece, is always keeping them busy. From time to time, I will have students that don't quite get everything done, which is okay, because as you'll see at the end of each unit, I have students complete a learning reflection. And on that day, once they complete their learning reflection, they have time to tie up any loose ends that they have with their notebook cover or their word wall. So I start my unit one off with the interest inventory day. So I have them do the Jung typology test, which I will click on here. And what I've done is, you can see throughout these digital interactive notebooks, is everything they need for the day, everything that they're going to accomplish or need links to, is all linked within the slides. Like I said, I'm a big fan of links. So I'm going to click on this, and they're going to go through and they're going to take this test. My first year teaching for Decatur, I just had students, here's the link, read it, do it yourself. That did not work. So ever since then, I've read this out loud to my students. There has been, like I said, I do work with students that are lower on their reading levels. And so reading this out loud to them just helps things go a lot smoother. A lot of times they don't fully understand some of the questions, so I'm able to kind of explain as we go. And that just really helps my students. Now, I will have students that don't stay with me because they get it, they're good to go. That's totally fine. It's just those that need the little extra help definitely have it. So then I have them tell me what their 4-letter type formula is, what career and occupations are most suitable for your personality type, and then what are 3 famous personalities that share your personality characteristics. And then I have them complete their 16 personalities test as well, which, same thing, I do go ahead and read this to my students as well. And then I have them tell me the name of their personality type, and then they will list the percent they scored in each category. And I also have given them an example of a Google Doc, because I used to do this in a Google Doc where they are completed, so they know what it should look like. Once they have finished their interest inventories, I have them do a little reflection, and I ask them 4 questions, and then they have to give me some answers. And this is information should all be based upon what they learned about themselves in their interest inventories. I also have my students take the Enneagram test. I know this is a very trendy test these days, and so I think it's always cool for students to come back into the classroom and be like, yeah, I was on Instagram last night, and this followers, this, because Enneagram's so trendy right now. But I also read to them the Enneagram test, and then I have them answer 4 questions as well. And then I have them do a self-reflection. So the self-reflection piece is where they take everything they've learned from their interest inventories and their Enneagram test, and then they reflect on that. Now, some of my students are really great at this. Some of my students are not. But I overall see it really beneficial, because I think a lot of the thoughts, feelings, emotions that students have within career development, especially when they're learning about themselves, is really valuable for them to kind of take some time and just reflect on it in a different way than what they're typically used to. Then I teach students about why we work, what work is, what's the difference between work and a job, things like that. In a career, a lot of my students, they think that the whole reason that you work is so that you can have money. Well, yes, we do need money. It's a way of the world. Yes, we need money to survive, but we also work for other reasons. We want to feel like we're accomplishing something within our lives. We want to meet new people and build relationships with like-minded people. So we talk a lot about the other aspects of work besides making money, which is normally a big mind blow for my students. I also have my students complete the Real Life Arkansas, which, if you have not done this before, it is, I have them do the reality check. So this lets them know what their future salary, based upon their interests and their wants and their needs and their desires, how much money they're going to need to make. Now, I will say This past year when I was doing it, I felt like it was very outdated. So I'm hoping someone somewhere will update this. And I'm going to be looking for something to do a little bit differently next year. But I think it's really good information still, even though it's a little bit dated. I just think with inflation and different things like that, it's not necessarily as good as it once was, but it still is really good. And my students always are like, oh my gosh, I have to make this much money. I have to go to school for this long. So it's like a really big aha moment. And my last slide of every unit is this learning reflection, like I've said. So I ask my students the same 5 questions at the end of each unit. What did you learn? Why does this learning matter? What connections have you made between our class and the outside world? What are some of your current wonderings and how you might explore them? And what ways are you evolving as a learner? And what ways are you proud of? And what areas would you like to grow as a learner? So, like I said, I think a lot of what students are learning in career development sparks a lot of different thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And so I think that it's great for students to kind of have a reflective time with that. And I also think that it's good for students to make connections to what they're learning in career development outside of the classroom and outside of school. And for them to identify how they're just evolving as themselves. I think that that's something that a lot of times students don't really think about. I will say some of my students do really well with this. Some of my students are excellent at reflecting. They are honestly better at it than I am. However, some of my students are not, and that's totally okay. My students get better and better with this with each unit. So unit 1 might be a little bit shaky, but by the time it comes to unit 2, they're doing better. Unit 3, they're doing even better. So we do take what we know. I provide really detailed feedback on this learning reflection in each unit, but especially unit 1, and then they learn and grow off of the feedback that I give them. I don't grade this super harshly or anything like that because it is the student's own thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Now, great. How do I use digital interactive notebooks and still keep up with grading and things like that? Because some of these notebooks, you can see they take a couple of weeks to complete. What I have found works the best for me, and within my school district, we are required to be posting at least one grade a week. So it would be unrealistic for me to post one giant grade, after 2 weeks of work. What I do is I go through, and in Google Classroom, you can actually see students' work without them turning it in. So instead of giving my students a big DIMB Unit 1 grade out of a big amount of points, I go through and I grade each individual slide. And I don't grade every single slide because that would be a ton of grades, but I do like an interest inventory grade. And so I grade everything for their interest inventory. I do an Enneagram grade, and I grade everything for their Enneagram, or a self reflection grade. I didn't grade wide work, and then I think I did grade real life Arkansas. And then I'll give them just like a completion grade for their unit 1 at the end once they've turned it in, and that's for if they've done their cover and their word wall. And I hate to say a completion grade because I still want to make sure they're doing everything correctly, but that's just mainly they completed all their work. So good job for them. But that is how I kind of stay on top of grading. I only grade like the major assignments within the DINB. The why work, where we're just kind of learning some stuff about why we work, I'm not necessarily taking a grade on. I'm taking a grade on like bigger, more project type things. Now, Unit 2, you can see this probably looks very familiar, but in this unit, I'm having students personalize their notebook cover using images that relate to a career they might find interesting. Once again, I'm getting to know what my students a little bit better by knowing what careers they might be interested in by looking at their notebook cover. They have their word wall with their Quizlet, they're typing a definition in a sentence, and they're doing this in their own time once they finish their day's assignment. To start off our unit, I did my first digital jigsaw this past year. I think I did this in September. And what I did was I made a table, and they have the different career clusters here. And then I typed in a student's name on the left side of the table. And so that let them know like this student was agriculture, food, and natural resources. And then over here, I had linked a slide which had their name, and then their career cluster at the top of it. And then I had them give me a definition, some interest of someone that might be in that career, and then 3 careers within that cluster. So each student did this for their career cluster. And all of the students were working in the same Google Doc or Google Slides presentation at the same time. Once they finished that, students went up and they presented to the class. So we did a little bit of public speaking skills. They presented to the class on their career cluster. So they, instead of having students get up and walk around the room and visit each career cluster like in a typical jigsaw, since this was done digitally, I had students come up and actually present. Once we completed presentations, I had students give me 5 and tell me 5 things that they learned within this little hand. And then I had them answer the question, what career cluster did you find the most interesting and why? The next thing I did was I had them complete a job application. So when I first started teaching career development, as an intern actually, I always had my students complete a job application that was like printed off from, I think one of them that I had was Wendy's and one of them was like Subway. So it was a fast food restaurant job application. However, we now, the majority of the time, we have job applications that are online. So there isn't really a good way to fill out a real job application online without turning it in and holding students accountable for that. So what I did was I made a Google form that was a job application. And I have sharing this all with you so you can actually go in and look at this on your own because it does have several questions. But you go in, you start. I did have students tell me their name first and foremost, so I knew who to give the grade to. But then I gave them all of the information they needed to fill out the job application for just some random made up person. Because what I have found when I was having students fill out the printed off paper job applications was that a lot of the time students didn't know some of their personal information, which, why, yes, is alarming. This is not really what I'm trying to teach them in this moment. Right now, I'm trying to see if they can fill out a job application, not that they know their address. Okay. Some students also did not want to give me their address. Now, do we have their address on eSchool? Yes, but students can be silly like that sometimes. So what I did was I went through with my class and I completed the job application for job application 1 with my students. So they got to kind of see, I modeled for them what exactly this should look like. And then they did job application 2 for John Paul Smith on their own. So that was their independent work. So I modeled for them with job application 1, and then I let them fly solo on job application 2. And then I asked them the 5 essential questions that I'd asked from Unit 1. Again, I will say students do better on this one. So Unit 2, short and sweet, but I think it has some really valuable information, and we do some really cool things in Unit 2. Unit 3 is understanding career decision-making skills. So in this unit, I'm having students personalize their notebook using images that relate to goals that they might have. So I'm getting to know them through their goals, through this notebook cover, and then they have their word wall, which looks the same as it did for units 1 and 2. They're giving me a definition, they're giving me a sentence, and they have their Quizlet linked. So the first thing I did for Unit 3 was we talked about the decision-making process. So I had some slides that explained the decision-making process, and then I actually had a Padlet that I had students answer. What is the decision-making process? Who can use the decision-making process? And why is the decision-making process beneficial? If you haven't used Padlet, it's really a fun way to kind of get students responding to questions where everyone can kind of see, and then we can talk about some different responses. It's a great tech tool that you should experiment with. So once we talked about the decision-making process, I gave my students a scenario, and then I had them tell me what the problem was, what their options were, positive and negative outcomes, and then they had to choose the best option. So they learned about the decision-making process, and then they actually put it into practice. Then we learned about setting goals. We learned about short-term, medium, and long-term goals and SMART goals. So I had a whole presentation that I talked about with my students on setting goals, which why do we set goals? So that is that. You can look through that on your own time. And then I had us play a little Kahoot about goals. And then we came in the next day and we set 2 short-term goals, 2 medium-term goals, and 2 long-term goals. Now, I think the reason that this is just such a short assignment for one day is I think we had like a little half day, which means we have about 25-minute classes. So I was just trying to get students in and get them doing something for the day. So you could definitely easily combine these 2 slides if you wanted to. Then I had students make a career plan. So I had this slide posted on Google Classroom individually outside of the digital interactive notebook. The reason I did that was because I didn't feel like I could give students enough space to list all of their plans within the digital interactive notebook format. So they just completed this outside of this, but there still was a slide so they knew what they should be doing on the day. And then we wrapped up our unit with our same 5 questions for our learning reflection. Normally by unit 3, the majority of my students are really good at this. And then they, of course, have time to finish up any loose ends with their word wall and their cover. Now, like I said earlier, unit 4 is where we kind of break away from the digital interactive notebook for just a little bit. So I'm going to start with my career research project first. So my career research project looks a little bit different because I wanted to have students have more room to be writing complete sentences and thoughts because this is an actual research project. My goal within this project is to have students learn how to conduct research without just completely throwing them to the wolves. So that they're kind of learning that. So when they get into high school, they have a little bit of background knowledge on it. It's also a great way to be incorporating that literacy piece into my classroom because I'm having students write complete sentences based on research that they have completed. Now, like the digital interactive notebook, I have a schedule listed on slide 1, and then I have all of the slides linked so they know exactly if they come into class on Tuesday, March 9th, they need to go here and go to slide 5. So in my project, this is what I asked them. I asked them, what are you researching? What job are you researching? Why does this job interest you? What education and training requirements, previous experience, and other requirements are there? And then what is the median pay? Now, like I said, I'm not trying just to throw them to the wolves. So I went through and I linked valuable websites that would help them conduct the research off to the side. For my next slide, I have them answer the questions, what are some of the day-to-day responsibilities and tasks? And then what are some of the extra responsibilities you might encounter in this career? So once again, I linked off to the side some different websites that I thought would be beneficial to help them find this information. They are not required to use these websites. They are required to give me a source link for where they found their information. And I tell students that I should be able to copy and paste this source link into my browser and pull up the same information they told me in this square here. So this is giving them practice citing their sources. I've done the same thing for how much education and training is required to gain an entry-level position and where can one go to receive the education and training needed, what colleges or educational facilities can you go to. And then I've also done the same thing for what are some of the benefits associated with this career, what are some of the hazards associated with this career. So once they've researched their career, I'm going to have them research the education and training component. So I have students research 2 schools for me. These do not have to be a college or university. They can be a trade school as well. So no matter what path students want to take, there should be an option for them to research 2 schools. I've listed 2 different websites over here off to the side, but just like within our previous slides, they're not required to use those, but they are required to give me a source link. Once they've researched their institutions of higher learning, I have them do a goal setting organizer, and this helps them take all of the information that they have learned about their career and actually begin to set goals for their future within this potential career. This takes what we learned in Unit 3 about goal setting and puts it into practice in Unit 4. So it's a very great unit to unit connection. Now, the other thing that I do in Unit 4 is my high school planning, which I'm going to pull up my curriculum map to show you this. So, Unit 4 is understanding high school and career planning skills. So we did our career research project to help with that career planning skills, but now we're doing the high school planning process. So what I do is I have students do a high school planning Google Sheets thing. Okay. I will show that to you. I don't know how to describe it. And I really want to change this assignment this year to put it into a digital interactive notebook style, but I just haven't been able to wrap my mind around that. But what I do is I share with my students the different completer pathways that we offer at Decatur High School. So they're all listed there. I have students plan their schedules for their 9th grade year, their 10th grade year, their 11th grade year, and their 12th grade year. So this is what an actual high school planning document looks like. So I have students go in and tell me the class name of all the classes they're planning to take. They have a different sheet for their 9th grade year, their 10th grade year, 11th grade year, and their 12th grade year. And then I have them go in and tell me how many units are needed for graduation, how many units are available is how many units you can earn from that class, how many units they've earned at this point, and then how many they have remaining. So those numbers change. You know, their English credits, they've already earned a unit once they've come into 10th grade, hopefully. I do have my students go through and plan every single year of high school. Now, I tell them that this is not set in stone in any way, shape, or form, but it's good for them to maybe go back and think about when it comes time to start planning their schedules for their 9th grade year or their 10th grade year, and then maybe their 11th and 12th grade year even. I do make all of my students become a completer in some area. So based upon those completer pathways, I have them make themselves a completer. And then I have them complete this checklist before they turn it in. So they go through, and this tells them all the requirements that should be on their schedule. And so this makes sure they go through, they double check their work, and then they turn that in their high school planning with me. So like I said, I don't know exactly how to put that into a digital interactive notebook style, but I think it's really beneficial for them to go through and be planning that before they start making their schedule and they just have no idea. And I do make my students become a completer because I think it's in their best interest if they're a completer in one area. Unit 5 is how we wrap up career development. And so this is where we do our, I'm having trouble here. This is where we do our portfolio project. So our portfolio project is where we take everything that we've learned about ourselves and we incorporate them into a portfolio. I don't have students decorate this cover. And I didn't put dates on the top of this because I kind of really guide my classes with this. And I really just gauge it on how the class is finishing up. And then my students that I didn't see face to face, they just kind of did it on their own. But some of it just takes longer, and I want to see a student's creativity side. So I don't really put we're doing this, and this at this point, especially since it's the end of the semester and I do have some wiggle room at that point. I don't have dates on this, but I do tell them dates that it should be done. So the first thing we do is we talk about what a portfolio is. So I have a little video for them to watch and then a little article for them to read about what a portfolio is. And then I have them answer the question, how is a portfolio different than a resume? And why is it beneficial to have a portfolio and not just a resume? So then we talk about cover letters and resumes. So I watch a little video about what a cover letter is, and then I have a cover letter kit that I have purchased from TPT, and I've linked here for you guys. That it's a really detailed kit where it goes through paragraph by paragraph what should be in a cover letter. And I have students go in and complete that. And we did it on pen and paper for my in-person students, and those that were not in person with me just did it online. But the students that did it pen and paper, I made copies of and took their name off of it. And then I had students go through and give feedback. I posted them around the room and I had students go through and give feedback on each paragraph. So by the time that it was done, students had pure, revised, good cover letters that were written. And I felt like that was super beneficial. You don't have to use the kit from TPT, obviously. You have something about cover letters that works great for you, good, do it. It's just getting students in that practice of writing cover letters, and that's another way to incorporate literacy into your classroom, is having them doing like a writing workshop where they are getting that peer review. And then I had students make their resume. We used Canva to make a resume, and then I had a slides presentation about what all goes into a resume. And as I went through the slides is how they went through and created their resume. So you can look through that on your own. And then I had them just replace this camera picture with an actual JPEG of their resume. Then I have them make a business card using Canva. I give them a rubric so they know exactly what they should include. And then they replace the camera with a business card as well. Then we talk about professional email writing, which my students really struggle with. And so I have this email workshop that's from TPT as well that we work through. And then I have them actually send me an email that's asking me for a letter of recommendation for a scholarship that they are applying for, and then give them some little bit of information about the scholarship. And then I have them send it to me, and then I have them put a screenshot of that email there. So they're learning how to ask for a letter of recommendation while using what they learned for their professional email skills. And last but not least, I have them write another email. At this point in the semester, I was unsuccessful this past semester because it was just a crazy end of the school year. But the first fall semester of this year, we still did it. I have students come and interview with a panel of different teachers. And we ask them I have each teacher bring 2 questions to the table, and then I just make sure that they're not the same questions. They're just generic interview questions, kind of like what I asked with the one-on-one interview. And so then I have them write a follow-up email thanking the interview panel for their time over here off to the slide. So that is our end of the year portfolio, kind of taking everything that we've learned and putting it into practice. So that is what I do throughout my semester in career development. Now, I will say incorporating literacy was something else that I've, talked about here and there. Something that I do is when students are done with everything, even, they might not completely be done with their notebook cover or their word wall, but we have 10 minutes at the end of class where we're just done. So what I have them do is I read out loud the only 2 of Bobby Bones' books. If you don't know who Bobby Bones is, he's a country radio personality, and he is actually from Mount Ida, Arkansas, and he grew up very in poverty in a very just diverse living situation, and that is very similar to the backgrounds of the majority of my students. And so I think that it's really cool for my students to be able to see that and read his stories and learn about him and his life and how he became successful and got out of Mount Ida, Arkansas. Not that we should be, focusing on, we gotta get out of Arkansas, but how he was able to make something of his life. And so I think that's a really good story for students to get to learn about him. I just read it to them out loud. I don't have classroom copies for everyone. That is a goal of mine. I think it'd be really cool to have, but right now I don't. So I just read it to them, and the students really enjoy it, and it's promoting that culture of reading and literacy within their school. So that is all I have today. Thank you so much for your time. I hope that you learned something and are going to incorporate some of this into your career development classroom or any classroom that you're teaching. I just want to leave you with this quote: teaching is one profession that creates all other professions. And if you're a career development teacher, you are exactly doing this. You are helping students find their strengths and their weakness and putting that into their thoughts to become into a professional one day. So I hope you'll have a great rest of your summer. Thank you so much for your time.